Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining today's panel discussion on Pakistan's digital transformation, past, present, and future. This event is put together by the Institute of South Asian Studies, NUS, and the High Commission of Pakistan in Singapore. We are delighted to have with us today Her Excellency Ms. Rukhsana Afzal, High Commissioner of Pakistan to Singapore. We are also delighted to have the following distinguished speakers for today's panel discussion. Mr. Shabahat Ali Shah, former Chairman, National IT Board, Pakistan. Mr. Saghir Mufti, Chief Operating Officer, Habib Bank, Pakistan. Mr. Asif Salim, Senior Director, Oracle. Mr. Rehan Akhtar, Chief Digital Officer, Karandaz, Pakistan. And Ms. Jahan Ara, Founder and Chief Executive Officer, Catalyst Labs. We would also like to extend a welcome to the several government representatives present in the audience today. Dr. Karthik Nachappan, Research Fellow, ISAS, will moderate the session. Before we proceed with the event, we would appreciate it if the audience could switch off their microphones and videos throughout the session. If you have any questions or feedback to share, please forward them via the Zoom chat. The questions will be consolidated for the panelists to answer. Please note that this session is live streamed on ISAS's Facebook page. I now invite Her Excellency, Ms. Rukhsana Afzal, to deliver the opening remarks for the session. Your Excellency, please.
Thank you, Nishant. Assalamu alaikum, ladies and gentlemen, and a very good afternoon. I feel privileged to be addressing this August gathering of experts on Pakistan's digital transformation. I'm extremely grateful to the Institute of South Asian Studies for providing us this platform to connect with Singaporean audience. I'm also grateful to our panelists for joining this event to appraise us on Pakistan's journey on the path of digital transformation. With the emerging trends on digital front and the investment incentives offered by the government of Pakistan, I'm sure the Singapore-based companies would find opportunities for productive investment undertakings in Pakistan. The COVID-19 pandemic, while posing global challenges for public health and economy, has also created opportunities that have paced up digital transformation. Extensive lockdowns and social distancing measures have compelled people to rely on digital tools and apps to carry on with their day to day tasks, with online transactions and payments becoming a norm. According to the UN, retail sales in e-commerce sector saw a dramatic rise from 16% to 19% in 2020. This trend is most likely to continue throughout the recovery time. In Pakistan, too, the digital market is experiencing an unprecedented rise. A record 35% growth in the market size of the e commerce industry has been observed, with an increase to 575 million US dollars in the first quarter of 2021 as compared to 421 million US dollars in the previous year. More than 100% growth has been witnessed in the rise of digital firms over the past 1 year, opening up new avenues of foreign investment. Over the course of past few months, Pakistan's technology ecosystem has come to life in unprecedented fashion. In 2021, Pakistani startups are on track to raise more money than the previous 5 years combined. Even more excitingly, a large portion of this capital is coming from international investors from across Asia, the Middle East, and even famed investors from Silicon Valley. As part of its digital transformation, Government of Pakistan is pursuing a multi-pronged implementation strategy. This will range from nascent policy interventions to create a harmonized regulatory investment to digital awareness and skill development programs to harness a culture of indigenous research and innovation. In addition, a comprehensive smart government ecosystem is being implemented for seamless and transparent service delivery. Efforts are underway to initiate a local e commerce system and to provide internet access to every citizen. Setting up a universal service fund to extend optic fiber connectivity is one among many initiatives the government has undertaken. The State Bank of Pakistan has been providing massive support to the digitalization campaign. It has already launched a regulatory approval system for end to end digitalization of foreign exchange related cases. It has also launched the Roshan digital account for overseas Pakistanis, which provides digital banking and investment solutions to expatriates. The Securities and Exchange Commission of Pakistan has introduced digital account opening system to enhance investors outreach and ensure robust growth of capital markets. Pakistan has all the right ingredients for a flourishing startup ecosystem, a booming middle class, increasing internet penetration, and a youth bulge of 140 million below the age of 30. Singaporean IT companies can tap into a huge reserve of qualified and talented professionals at a fraction of the cost compared to over here. This fast growing sector is targeted to reach $20 billion mark by 2025. With its economic reforms agenda, Pakistan has jumped 28 ranks in the World Bank's Ease of Doing Business Index last year. Pakistan is an emerging economy projected by McKinsey Global Institute to be among the fastest growing in the coming years, with an annual growth rate of 6% by 2026. Singapore, with its huge foreign investment portfolio, can benefit immensely from Pakistan's friendly, open, and liberal investment policies designed to create a conducive business environment for foreign companies. The current trade between Pakistan and Singapore that stands at a meager $1 billion is far below its actual potential. At the High Commission, it is our priority to seek avenues of collaboration between Pakistan and Singapore in innovative ways. I am sure our panelists today would have a lot more to share with you in terms of investment potential in Pakistan's digital economy. I thank you all for joining us today and look forward to a great interactive session. Thank you very much.
Great. Thank you so much, Her Excellency, Ms. Ruxana. So, good afternoon, everyone. I want to begin by thanking you all for joining us today for this important discussion on Pakistan's digital transformation. Before we begin, I want to mention again that this webinar is jointly organized by the Institute of South Asian Studies at NUS and the High Commission of Pakistan in Singapore. And we are deeply grateful to the High Commission and the High Commissioner, Her Excellency Ruxana Afzal, for their active support to this endeavor. Countries across South Asia are undergoing digital transformations that have been turbocharged by the COVID-19 pandemic. Governments are increasingly looking to expand their digital economies, develop ecosystems of innovation that could create new digital apps and services, and make them more amenable and accessible to citizens that are using these tools to communicate and transact than ever before. In South Asia, Pakistan stands out as a country that has been taking and making several critical strides in terms of digitalization. Over the past 18 months, Pakistan's technology ecosystem has come to life in an unprecedented fashion. A recent report suggests that Pakistan will account for 50% of global growth in new mobile internet users up to 2025. Increasing internet penetration in the country ensures greater demand for online services, and we are seeing existing and new players entering segments like e-commerce, fintech, and mobile payment spaces. The rise of Pakistan's technology ecosystem, however, has been no accident. It's the result of a confluence of factors on the ground, including growing mobile and internet connectivity, regulatory changes, and shifting dynamics in the startup and innovation sectors over the past few years. In this seminar today, we have with us a highly distinguished panel of experts and practitioners with deep knowledge and understanding of Pakistan's digital trajectory to help us understand this transformation, the conditions of fueling the changes, the role of the government in driving this digital shift, the rise of various fintech and mobile payment platforms and their ongoing impact, how Pakistani entrepreneurs are looking to capitalize and create services for a growing domestic and global market, and finally, what the implications of Pakistan's digital transformation are for countries and firms in Southeast Asia, including Singapore, who are themselves part of an active and thriving digital landscape. In terms of format, each panelist today will speak for about roughly 10 to 12 minutes first, before we then move into the discussion and the Q&A session with the audience. Please do use the chat function throughout the session to drop your questions, and we will take it up during the Q&A. With that, I want to welcome and introduce our first speaker, Mr. Shabahat Ali Shah, the former chairman of the National IT Board in Pakistan, to kick us off with his remarks on what the Pakistani government has done in the recent past to propel Pakistan's digital transformation. Mr. Shah, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Karthik, and thank you, Your Excellency, Mr. Rukhsana. So, this has been, I think this is a great opportunity and great times when we are talking about digital transformation of Pakistan and the challenges that we are facing at the moment and the trajectory that we have just experienced in the last 24 months or so across the landscape of different verticals, private and the public sector of Pakistan. Let me begin with giving you a little bit of a synopsis what has been done in the last few years in Pakistan in context of digital transformation. If you recall, the first and the foremost organization which kicked off the digital transformation of the manual processes, so to speak, in the very first place was NADRA, which started its operations in the year 2000 when they digitized the national ID cards of Pakistan. I think that was the most significant milestone that Pakistan achieved in terms of e-governance and digitization of processes at the federal government level, which trickled down to provincial governments also. Since then, there has been lots and lots of work that has been done, but there have been a few handicaps we had. There was a little bit of a slow pace with which connectivity and digitization itself was being carried out at the government level. But in the last 8 to 10 years, I believe, the connectivity piece has been filled up by the operators who have revamped their network to the latest and the modern technologies. Over-the-top players came in as well as the operators who have came up with a very aggressive approach of lighting up all those underserved areas and non-served areas of Pakistan. We do not have internet connectivity. So we have seen a boom of digital systems, apps, and so many different new companies coming up on board across all the different industries, which has given this kind of an insight to the government also that they should also digitize and make the platform conducive for the private sector also, to collaborate with the government and deliver. National ID Board, if I look back, 2 years ago, Prime Minister of Pakistan gave a mandate to National ID Board to make federal government, at least capable of creating a paperless environment across all the ministries, right? All the 44 ministries at the federal government level. So which means that there has to be a drive and that there has to be a direction that needs to be set where all the manual processes being initiated at the government level needs to be done on digital systems so that we would be able to achieve a three-pronged objective of the PM office: induce transparency across the government sectors, induce accountability across all the government organizations and departments, and last but not the least, create a platform where citizens would feel ease of doing business with the government. So since the private sector was moving so fast, across each and every level of the private sector, new companies that were coming up, inevitably they were terminating, their processes were terminating somewhere in the government. And if the government is opaque, and if they do not have digitized systems, the speed of private sector would absolutely going to be hampered. So that was basically the idea. In the last 2 years, at least what we have done, which I'm going to share with you in a short while, what we have done, we have set the pace of the government to transform the manual processes across the most strategic and in the core ministries and departments of the federal government, so that the citizens should feel, they should feel at ease if they are working with the government through digital conduits. Pandemic, as Karthik has mentioned earlier also in our conversation, I think COVID-19 has actually acted as a catalyst in terms of inducing digital transformation across the government. We actually set up a national command and operation centers in the heart of the federal capital, which developed systems. And in the first time in the history of Pakistan, the health sector created a system where close to 5,000 significant hospitals all across the country, they were converged onto one platform and gave a single window snapshot of whatever equipment, whatever kind of patients coming in, into those hospitals, giving a real-time insight of what kind of clusters across COVID patients are appearing across different geographies of Pakistan. Apart from that, we also developed the smart lockdown system, right, at the National Command and Control System, based upon the clusters that we visualized appearing across different geographies. We initiated different mechanisms and decision-making tools to take immediate decisions on the fly, which particular geography or the segments needs to be locked down to curb the spread of the virus instantaneously. So if you look at the numbers of the corona spread across Pakistan, the numbers are startling in context of what has been going on in our neighborhood. Pakistan has used technology right down to the wire to control the virus spread by not just by throwing bodies in the field, but using the technology at par with the decisions that were taken on ground. There's another important initiative that we took almost a year and a half ago. We created the e-services digital platform for the citizens of Pakistan, which has been rolled out in 3 major cities of Pakistan, where we have given the citizens on the palm of their hand to submit and carry out the government processes digitally on their mobile phone. For example, if somebody wants to pay their property tax, if somebody wants to pay their car token tax, somebody wants to transfer its vehicle from one name to another, we have made sure that every citizen who has got a smartphone on his hand, he should be or she should be able to perform that function sitting at their home. Pandemic has also, struck very hard across Pakistan from north to south and caused massive disasters, apart from the conventional disasters that we have seen, like the flooding, locust control, dengue virus spread. So we've also worked extensively with National Disaster Management Authority to create a single platform where the federal government would be able to monitor and control all kind of natural disasters that is happening, across Pakistan. So flooding is one of them, which happens every year. We know COVID has hit Pakistan, and then we are going through the 3rd and the 4th wave as well. So this is one-stop shop, which is providing us an insight on what's going on across Pakistan, and we can control the supply chain, which is going to augment the field operators to facilitate them to, curb the disaster in at the right instance where it needs to. Another important initiative I would like to mention here, Pakistan is a budding young economy. You have seen so many entrepreneurs coming up across Pakistan, across different verticals, fintech, telecom, e-commerce, right? So many different areas where we have seen movement and mobility. We have created at the government level an AI-based youth development platform where the platform is going to give an insight to the government what kind of interest our youth has across different entrepreneurship verticals. And most importantly, it gives us those geographies as well, where there are certain interest areas around clothing industry, for that matter, fintech, yes, south of Pakistan. We have seen services industry booming up in the north of Punjab. So it has, first time again in the history of Pakistan, we have actually seen government taking decisions and making decisions based upon real data that is coming from the field. And the data sources that we have plugged into the system are the Kamyab Jawan loan program that we have given to the SMEs. And the SMEs have started, different businesses, across different verticals. And then we have also induced other skill development programs also into this program so that we know what kind of skills are, ramping up in different areas. This is going to help tremendously to the government to carry out their budget planning for the next fiscal year, which has never been done based upon pure data, in the past. The government has also been very excited about this. We have also created, again, for the first time in the history of Pakistan, a performance evaluation system for the federal cabinet as well. So federal cabinet has not just digitized all its processes on digital tablets. There is no paper there in the cabinet system at the moment. But at the same time, every ministry and every federal minister and the state minister has got a portal to log into and chalk in and plug in their objectives, which Prime Minister has given to them, and submit their report, right, quarterly, that what kind of achievements that they have done. So it was an extremely challenging task to ramp up the government in context of adopting all these different kind of systems that we have built. But now we have actually seen the hockey stick kicking in. Initially, we were reeling at a very slow pace, but since people have looked at this whole landscape where they see benefits, popping up in every nook and corner with adoption of these digital systems. So I can see the adoption, is being, I can see adoption being embraced by every department in the federal government. Last but not the least, I would like to mention one more thing here, which is very, very important to understand, is the public-private partnership at the government level. Government, has got, of course, a shortage of skill set development, we all know. A plan that we have devised to short circuit, this route of e-governance development is we are plugging in the skill set from the private sector with the government, so that the stuff that we initially envisioned that we probably be able to achieve in about 18 months of time frame because of the scarcity of skill development, private sector comes in and they will pitch in their piece to fill up this particular puzzle which we want to roll out, and cut down this time frame of development by at least 50%. Lots of systems at the NCOC level, NDMA level, and
1 minute, sorry.
Yeah, and especially the overseas citizen portals that we have built. A lot of work that has been done based upon the effort that was being put up by the private sector. Now, with this, I hand over the mic back to Karthik, and the next speaker is on the line.
Great. Mr. Shah, thank you so much for giving us that very comprehensive overview of how technologies are altering governance and the relationship between citizens and the Pakistani government during this pandemic. Next, it's my great pleasure to introduce Mr. Sagir Mufti, the COO of Habib Bank Pakistan, to offer his thoughts on the HBL's digital transformation over the recent past and the implications of that for other firms and industries in Pakistan looking to digitize. Mr. Mufti?
Thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for your participation. I will cover 3 topics with you in the next 10 to 12 minutes. The role of digital in financial inclusion at HBL, the framework for a bank to undertake digital transformation, and I'll share with you our experience at HBL, and a few bumps on the way as one goes down this road. It's an interesting road, but it's a bumpy road. So I'll share with you a few challenges that we feel all organizations face when they undertake such a transaction. So financial inclusion. For a long time at HBL, we was hovering around 8 to 10 million customers. Today, we are standing at 31 million customers. That could not have been possible without digital. And a lot of it has to do with expanding our traditional markets, traditional client segments, and moving into bringing in the unbanked. And I'll give you 3 examples of things we did in that space. We launched an app focused on bringing the unbanked into the banking system. And in 2.5 years, or less than that, we have been able to acquire 6.3 million customers on it. More important from our point of view was the profile of the customers. We were tracking the segments coming in. In the banking system in Pakistan, women represent somewhere between 10 and 12% of the population of customer base. Very low. In Connect, we are hovering around 20%, double what we and other banks have been able to do through traditional channels to attract women who are unbanked into the banking sector. Similarly, we have put through not just the clients, but transactions for them. We are processing in a year about 2.5 trillion rupees of transactions with this target market population. So one, there's engagement, onboarding of clients, and second, utilization of the platform. Another example of financial inclusion was the work we did as being the first bank in agriculture to integrate with the Punjab land records that serves 5 million customers. Now, what's the advantage of that? We were able to create a visual representation of farms, to do geotagging for them, to allow and improve the credit decision-making, to allow us to provide credit facilities to farmers. We have been able to launch an e-wallet called Kisan Card across multiple geographies of Pakistan. And in the last 6 months, we have acquired 500,000 customers, and our plan is to increase it to 2.5 million customers in the next 18 months or so. This will allow the farmers to hold financial value in the wallets and use it for purchase of inputs into their cycle for farming. Similarly, we have been able to offer the Connect platform and extend it for supply chain payments and financing. We have been able to disburse over 10 billion rupees to farmers from various schemes available to farmers. And it covers 1.5 million farmers. Now, these numbers are sizable by any account. And then lastly, there was a private-public partnership where we worked with the government in supporting a program to provide social safety payments to vulnerable women. And we disbursed to 12 million women over $1 billion using the digital assets to process those payments and deliver to them wherever they were in the country. So those are some of the examples to show you not just how financial inclusion can benefit, but what are some of the drivers, whether it's the farmers, the SMEs, or women who were outside the banking network. So next, I would like to share with you a little bit about the framework. How are we approaching digital transformation at HBL? First and foremost, I would like to share with you two key principles in any transformation, to my mind, which are very important, including digital. For us, it's very important to make banking simpler, to free up our clients, to enrich their lives by spending their time on other things than something boring as banking. Banking is a chore. It should not take up as much time of a customer as it does today. Second, we are very keen on technology-driven digital enablement for our customers, but with a human touch. We don't want a customer getting lost in a maze of automated instructions. So whatever we do, we will make sure people feel comfortable with the digital assets we offer to them. So whether it's in the informational needs or transaction execution, we want to look at how to make it easier for customers to access so that they are able to undertake those transactions which are typical patterns through the digital assets. Believe it or not, 60% of our inquiries of our customers are about their account balance or blocking a card. Why do they need to wait in a branch in a queue for 20 minutes to do that? Or in a call center for 10 minutes on a line? Why can't they do that from the comfort of their living room or their office in 2 minutes on our app? That's what I mean, looking at it from a transactional point. Same for transactional needs. Transaction needs are around movement of funds, investment of funds, or disbursement of funds. Those activities are not complicated and they can be offered to our clients in a much easier way. And so we are doing that in terms of whether it's the informational needs or the transaction needs. When it comes to advisory space, absolutely. Bring in the human touch, bring in the people, the relationship managers. When it comes to problem resolution, step up to assist the customer. But most important of all, clients, when they need us through the human channel, we will be there to serve them. How do you build this into a bank's strategy as part of the framework? It has to be part of the strategy, not a project. What do I mean by that? Whenever you develop a business plan, whether it's for a corporate solution or a retail solution, it has to be from the beginning part of the delivery mechanism, the client journey, ease of experience. When we did that, a very good example is personal loans. We introduced it a year ago, and we have been able to disburse 10 billion rupees of personal loans in 1 year through the mobile app, where a person got a decision within the same day on their application to us, and the money was in their account the next day. Without having to visit a branch, without having to visit an office, without having to come with a file full of papers to convince us that they're good people to lend to. Marketing strategy, social media engagement, lead generation, campaign analytics, where you can, instead of waiting days or weeks to know when you gave that ad on TV or newspaper, how the customer responded, within minutes, you're able to understand the client's interaction with your campaign and modify it, make it more effective for the client. Or in operations, digitization of processes. We right now have we're launching a robotic process automation process. It's a very interesting concept where you bring in automation with intelligence. We have 20 use cases up and running as pilots to ensure that it's not just the client engagement, the client interaction, but the servicing of the transactions and the processing of the transactions, which is also digitized inside the company. That's what I mean. You have to build it into the business strategy. It has to be in all elements of the strategy. It can't be imposed, superimposed on top of a strategy. The second important thing is the mindset. It has to be part of the culture. You have to create awareness from the board to the management, to the staff, to the customers. You have to reduce this fear of change. There is change and it's uncomfortable. Recognize it and put in place the right mechanisms to help explain to all the audiences what the benefit to it is, understand who's going to lose out from this change, and how to minimize the pain for them from their loss. So after the mindset in the culture, data-driven. Those are the pillars of a framework and a digital strategy. In data-driven, whether it's client behavior, understanding it on how to do business with us, who are the clients who are our target market and who are thinking about doing business with us? How do we create a better lead generation mechanism for them versus sending out 1,000 flyers and maybe getting a 10% response to that? Risk management, in addition to financial criteria, which is the standard way a bank used to do risk assessment, take into account behavior patterns, which you can now start understanding better through data. To dashboards from client service, are they getting the right service or not? To procurement, to the spend in procurement, to the supply chain management. The way to make a company truly have a data-driven culture is to ensure the use of data on every management decision point. It's hard, but if you organize yourself and put the right tools in place, it can be done. And that brings me to the last point of a digital strategy, partnerships. You can do this journey alone. Anybody can do it. It's hard. Or you can partner with the right partners, whether they're fintechs, whether they're traditional companies. In our case, we are partnering with fintechs. We have at least 4 fintechs, which are our partners, including one in which we invested in, called Finja. 2, SAP, which is a large company, but with fantastic data projects. So we bought the data lake from them, which is helping us improve the data integrity, the ownership of data, and the use of data to drive the data-driven culture. Finja is helping us understand how to use behavior scoring in lending to SMEs. So partnerships are very important. In partnerships in Pakistan, some numbers will share with you. I would encourage all of you to think about Pakistan. As I like to say, Pakistan is open for business. In this year, we've seen over $300 million come into the fintech world, which is double the amount last year. I think we are about 5 to 7 years behind Indonesia. So those of you in Asia who saw what happened in Indonesia, I think you'll see a similar pattern repeating itself in Pakistan. I would encourage you to study Pakistan and look at it. It's a very good time. It's a ripe market for fintechs. So those are the pillars of the strategy which go into the framework to make digital work for HPL. Lastly, challenges. Nothing easy. There's nothing easy. The 3 challenges I'll just share with you. There's too much to do to prioritize. It's fast-changing world. Every day there's something new happening. Decide where to put the stake in the ground rather than chase the trends and the fads. There's always something new tomorrow which is going to happen. Don't change your strategy for that. Have a strategy, say this is where my customer will get the most benefit. Sometimes a 3-year app is actually better and customers prefer it because they know how to use it than every morning doing a new release for an app. I know this is a controversial topic. Some of you say, no, we have to give something new to the customer. We have to improve functionality. Yes, but we also have to respect the customer and their desire to be comfortable with what they use from us. And then last issue is something common to all of us in Pakistan and outside Pakistan. It's a new place. There's new talent needed. To me, again, in talent, it has to be a hybrid approach. We need the new, the young, and the experienced to create a coalition. And it's the coalition of this talent which will make us organization successful in its digital transformation, not harboring one or the other. So those are some of the brief comments I want to share with you. I'm happy to clarify anything under the Q&A section as we go into it. Kartik, I apologize. You wanted to say something?
No, I just wanted to say that your time is almost up. Thank you. Thank you so much again. Thank you so much again, Mufti, for sharing how your bank, a large one with many layers, is working to eliminate the frictions that exist in banking, particularly in a developmental context in South Asia. Next, I want to invite
You're an aircraft carrier trying to move like a speedboat. Thank you.
Next, I want to invite Mr. Rehan Akhtar, the Chief Digital Officer of Karandaz, Pakistan, to speak and add your thoughts on how entities like Karandaz, which has a social focus, are looking to deploy digital tools and platforms to advance different objectives, including financial inclusion. Rehan, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you, Kartik. Thank you for inviting on this esteemed panel. So Karandaz is a not-for-profit organization. It's funded by FCDO, previously known as UK8, and Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. The vision that we carry is a financially included and an economically empowered Pakistan and Pakistanis. And when we talk about Pakistan and Pakistanis, we want to impact both the individuals as well as SMEs. Both of these sectors in Pakistan, both of these segments in Pakistan are underserved when it comes to financial institutions or financial sector. So when we look at the overall landscape of any ecosystem, and if we narrow down to payments, what we figure out is, there could be sort of 3 to 4 ways to slice and dice an ecosystem. On one hand, it needs to have an enabling policy and regulation. It also needs to have an enabling and a right infrastructure on which the whole ecosystem could sort of develop. And then we need to have a thriving private sector, because without private sector, you really can't have adoption. You really can't take your product to the masses. And last but not least, we need to have a supporting public sector as well, so that the private sector and the public sector, they're not locking horns when it comes to serving different needs of the public. So the topic, digital transformation, past, present, and future. I think in digital transformation, there's not much to look at in the past, other than the fact there are some lessons. We had our first mobile money license, which was offered way back in 2004 or 5, and we had some branchless banking players who started their operations. And fast forward, a decade or so, and I think some of our other members talked about, panelists talked about, we still have not a very significant number of people who are using accounts. So the question is why, even after a decade or so, we could not reach that tipping point where majority of people would have access to banking account. And for that, the central bank, of course, has a leading role in terms of policy and regulation, coupled with other key government institutions, to really make documentation, opening an account, etc., as easy as possible, so that on a click of a button, you could open an account and you don't have to, really think about a very laborious process of opening an account and maintaining an account. And for that, over the years, a number of initiatives have taken place. Very recently, there is a framework of digital onboarding of customers that has been launched by central bank, which basically then enables you to essentially open an account remotely through a video KYC, and you don't need to visit, the branch, or the brick and mortar infrastructure is not required. So these are some of the enablers that State Bank has been putting in. And a couple of years ago, we also had another license regime which was enabled. by a central bank, which is EMI. In some countries, it's categorized as the payments license or payments bank. And again, you don't have to be a bank, you could be a fintech, and you could actually create wallets and create customers. And of course, you need to work with a bank, but you could have your own brand, own service, etc., which would help serve the customer needs. And then there are other number of developments on the policy side which has happened. In the infrastructure side, one of the things which was missing in Pakistan was having a true real-time instant payment infrastructure which could enable the much needed interoperability. Pakistan has kind of missed out on the card market, while all the schemes are quite dear to us. But when you look at some of the numbers, so our POS deployment at merchant is a very meager 70,000 POS machines. So the acceptance of digital payments at the merchant is quite low. Whatever the reason may be, but now with the era of NFC and QR code-based acceptance, there's a lot more possibilities of creating acceptance models in which a merchant could be onboarded much more quickly at a much lower cost and served at a much lower cost and a service fee as well. So I think that's something which will enable to open further the market in Pakistan when it comes to digital payments. And RAS is one infrastructure that has been launched by State Bank of Pakistan. Karandaz helped State Bank of Pakistan develop that key infrastructure. And that infrastructure is positioned to solve a few of the underlying issue of how the ecosystem is designed. One is, of course, that payment has to be frictionless, and the modern technology through alias payments and not targeting, the IBANs and the long word numeric and alphanumeric bank accounts, creates an ease in, how the payments could be sort of made. So that's one sort of feature that RAS is going to bring in. But the other one is also that RAS is modeled on the modern payments infrastructure, which even Far East is definitely following and some of the other countries are following, in which it becomes the layer for innovation. So it can sort of, put the tracks on which, if we go towards open banking, if we go towards PSD2, and some kind of a modern or forward-looking policy regime and a regulation regime, so the infrastructure could actually enable that as well. We do believe, and this is at least our assessment, that the banks alone, and I think that's true in all the countries or most of the countries, they will not be able to provide all and every service. So the market has to be fragmented in a way to cover the overall client base or all segments of society. And you need new and different business models, leaner business models, fintechs, which can focus on specific use cases and be champions of it and create their market share and their business models in that sort of space. So RAS is going to enable that as well in the future. In terms of the thriving private sector innovation, we definitely see, and we have HPL making a presentation about what is their journey about digitization. And then, of course, they're the pioneers and they're the largest bank in Pakistan. But now we see a lot of banks and even non-banks are getting on this ambition or trying to create a digital ambition for their customers. I think the journey is still out there, and there are a lot of challenges one needs to sort of overcome, but at least the will in the investor and the mindset of the chief executives and the boards, that we have started to see. And then last but not least, the public sector. The public sector is also kind of, the frozen public sector is thawing. the government payments, either it is to the citizens in terms of stipends or subsidies. So there's active work going on. We are part of some of the work to help enable or create an ecosystem where the payments could actually be transferred instead of cash into an account, and what that account would be and how would it sort of fit into the profile of the beneficiary that is being targeted. And similarly, when the government is receiving money, what are the frictions and how they could be removed. So I think Pakistan is at a stage, I would say, if you minus the COVID trend, it was already on the rise when it comes to digital payments and digitization of banking services. We have active two regulators, Central Bank of Pakistan and Securities and Exchange Commission of Pakistan, who have been rolling out quite aggressively pro-digitization, pro-digital policies, and whatever gaps are there, they are very, very committed to solve those issues. So that for any entrepreneur, anybody who wants to set a business in digital financial services side, would have the right sort of guidance for that. And that's the reason we have very recently seen, interest of foreign investors in fintechs in Pakistan as well. We have a drive for financial inclusion. So that's also helping, open up the market. And then the private sector, as I talked about, they basically, we see, if I compare it with last 5 years ago, I think the private sector was quite passive in the last 5 years. Kudos to all the management and investors of private sector that they have now started focusing on this opportunity, as well. So now it's really up to the entrepreneurs and the free thinkers of what do they do with this opportunity and how do they create value propositions which will cover the market. Of course, Pakistan is a tough country when it comes to documentation. And that's where I think the government is also in a very, very supportive manner, supporting documentation through related policies. You have to have a carrot and a stick when it comes to documentation. And that's where the government is coming up with policies and enforcing some of the policies, which will also drive up, documentation. So it's a very interesting country. I think people who would love challenge of having a go at financial inclusion and enjoying the dividends of a market, which will grow at a very, very high pace. So Pakistan is the place to be. If there are any questions, happy to answer later.
Great, thank you, Rehan, for highlighting the fact that that any digital transformation requires collaboration between different parts of society, including the private sector, the public sector, regulatory actors like the central bank, as well as citizens. And I think that's an important dimension which you highlighted. So next, we have with us Ms. Jahan Ara, the founder and CEO of Catalyst Labs Pakistan, to help us understand what's been happening on the startup front in Pakistan, particularly the flurry of private funding that has flown in, especially in 2021, to support new companies and new innovations, and also how this can be sustained over time. Jahan, over to you.
Thank you, Karthik. It's a pleasure to be here, and I'm really thankful to the Pakistan High Commission in Singapore and to yourselves for organizing this. This is really an exciting time in the Pakistan startup ecosystem. Now, coming forth in line after such awesome speakers, it's a bit difficult to leave out some of the things that I would have said. So I'm going to look at it from a totally different perspective. A little bit about myself, other than Catalyst Labs is a new venture, which is an accelerator program and a women leadership program, which I started on the 1st of May. But prior to this, I have spent 20 years as president of the Pakistan Software Houses Association, which is the trade body that represents the IT sector in Pakistan. And then in the last sort of 6 years were at an incubator that I set up, the Nest.io, during which time I worked with a lot of startups. So that'll give you a little bit of a background, people who don't know me. So the growing the startup and entrepreneurship ecosystem and encouraging innovation is something that I'm truly passionate about. Having been involved in it for several decades, I've seen many changes in the ecosystem, and yet much has remained the same. I remember when we started the Startup Insider series in multiple cities. This was way back in 2008. Experienced entrepreneurs used to share their time, their knowledge and experience, as well as their failures, and would inspire young people who were aspiring to be entrepreneurs, were not quite sure if they could cut it. I remember traveling through Pakistan as early as the turn of the century, meeting and seeing tech innovation in nooks and corners in multiple cities, unrecognized and unsupported heroes who had the grit and the determination and know-how to keep going, regardless the absence of a support network. Recognition of some of this innovation was the starter, in my opinion. So we launched the Pasha Launchpad events, where we recognized some of these startups, some of these ideas, helped showcase them, got them some initial amounts of seed capital, and connected them with people who could help them with advice. Then in 2003, we launched the Pasha ICT Awards. And that brought innovators to the fore and into the spotlight, locally as well as internationally. This is, in my opinion, was the beginning of tech and startup innovation in Pakistan. Fast forward into the next decade, we saw the emergence of incubators, Plan 9, which was set up by the Punjab government, the LUM Center for Entrepreneurship, the Nest.io, which I mentioned before. All these initiatives created not only a buzz, they were also brought together young people with crazy but innovative ideas, problem solvers who saw gaps in education, in healthcare, lack of opportunities for women, lack of efficiencies in many sectors, and they viewed them as opportunities. Many of those early initiatives failed. Some survived and continue to function even today. Others pivoted. Some angel investors put in small amounts of capital to help them experiment, who advised them, kept them going, or helped them see it as that it was time to call it a day and move on. There were those who helped them understand business fundamentals and market trends and so much more. These were my heroes. They were the men and women who believed when no one else did. The federal government, their NIC program, the National Incubator Program, launched centers in all capital cities. That was a good move. I think the best thing incubation centers do is create clusters, provide networking spaces where people converge, where founders and mentors meet and engage, share ideas, offer support, celebrate each other. The people who run these spaces, who work in these spaces, need to be mission-driven, need to be facilitators, need to be connectors, need to be there to show direction, provide a shoulder to cry on when needed, and celebrate success when it happens. Over the course of the past 18 months, as you pointed out, Pakistan's startup technology ecosystem has come to life in an unprecedented and to many surprising manner. In 2021, Pakistani startups are on track to raise more money than the previous 5 years combined, maybe even more. Pakistan is a young country with a substantial young population, many of whom are online. Like tech ecosystems in other emerging markets, there is an increase in the localized version of tried and tested models in the emerging markets. These tried and tested models have scaled rapidly due to the relatively untapped market. It is pertinent to discuss here what has actually driven the ecosystem to develop and grow at the rate that it is growing, and the factors that have contributed to it. So, one of the factors, of course, as was pointed out earlier, is the growing mobile connectivity, the young population, 3G, 4G, broadband, and also some of the things that the government has done in terms of legal changes, regulatory policies. Previously, for instance, under the ambit of Pakistani law, companies could not be owned by foreign holding companies. So any startup that raised investment from the international market could not have a branch anywhere else. Now they do. So they can open up in Singapore, they can open up in anywhere in Europe or the US, and that holding company then sends the money into Pakistan. So that was a good thing because it encouraged investors. There was confidence that they had. Now, I wanted to just, before I run out of time, I think in the last decade, there has been a significant increase in the number of young Pakistanis returning to the country after either completing their education or after working as professionals in other parts of the world. This has also given rise to a fresh wave of businesses being set up, which are attracting foreign capital. For example, Bazaar and Airlift. Another contributing factor is having conferences like the one we have been holding for the last 4 years, which is called 021 Disrupt. This brought investors from the international market and the local market together, and the audience grew. And this has been supported by HBL, which we're really thankful for, because these are the kind of things that need to happen to build ecosystems. It brings stakeholders together. And many of the early investments that happened as a result of meetings that people had at 021 Disrupt. Now, in the last couple of years, we've seen Series A, and in 21, Series B. So $445 million invested since 2015, out of which half was invested in 2021 alone. That's $233 million. This is year to date, and we still have 3 months left. Some of these figures, insights were provided by I2I, who does and brilliant insights update every now and then so that we can know what's going on. Some of the key reasons, in my opinion, are an awareness that entrepreneurship is an option brought on by evangelists like us, and through the setting up of incubators, accelerators, entrepreneurship programs, events, increasing larger customer base with access to technology and with the excitement to use technology, and increasing recognition of the talent that exists in Pakistan or that can be available with a little bit of grooming. And then organizations like unicorns like Careem, Keep Trucking, Affinity, EPMG have certainly played an important part, not only in hiring and developing great talent, but in producing what people affectionately call a mafia that has gone on to start their own ventures and draw investment due to their connections and the confidence of local and international investors in their capability to deliver. This has also led to an increase in the compensation for good talent, which is going to further increase the number of professionals taking up jobs in startups. Working for startups is now looked upon positively by society, even cool. An increasing number of active local investors. So Fatma Gobi, Sarmayakar, Laxon Venture Capital, I2I Ventures, 47 Ventures, Caravan, latest entry is Zen Capital, Walled City, Diosai Ventures. These are just the local investors that are investing. And some of them are then co-investing with international investors. Initially, we had Middle East Venture Partners, the Oman Technology Fund, SOSV, Shuruk, Spark Labs, and big rounds from Ant Financial and the Alibaba Group. However, in the last 2 years has been dominated by Indus Valley Capital and Fatma Gobi, taking the lead and co-investing and bringing in first round capital and other major investing organizations. So it was exciting when Kleiner Perkins invested Series A into Tajir, which was $17 million, which had been unheard of as far as younger startups were concerned. Then the first time Series B investment by Process in Pakistan of $13 million in Baikia was a great addition to that. And we thought, this is amazing. This is great. Nobody's ever going to invest more. And then we saw the $30 million investment in Bazaar, led by Defy and Wavemaker, followed by the $85 million investment in Airlift, which knocked everything out of the park. The setting up of a VC fund by HBL was great news because many others might follow. And they made an investment in Finja, which is a lending organization. And they have been lending, they've started lending, and they say that, the response that they've got has been amazing. Acceleration and adoption, consumer adoption of technology is one of the reasons. Founders with strong local and international experience is another reason. And I think the main verticals I just like to point out before I end appear to be the B2C, e-commerce, B2B retail, ride-hailing, travel services, so edtech, health tech. So organizations, startups like Bazaar, Tajir, Dastagir, Retailo, Bikea, Grocer App. Then there's Food Panda. Nothing happens in this country without a focus on food. Sasta Ticket, Find My Adventure. And then, of course, the fintechs, SadaPay, Tag. While we were engaging in our discussions this afternoon, I just saw a news break which said that that Tag has just been valued at $100 million. That's amazing. And then there's SafePay, which brought in investment from Stripe and Y Combinator. So that's begun to happen. Then we've got K-Trade, Abhi, DigiKhata, Credit Book, all fintechs. And then the fitness and health space. So Sehat Kahani, Marham, Find My Doctor, Dawai, AimFit, Augment Care. There's so many. And this is just a small number, but these are the ones that people are starting to talk about. And more recently, the freight and trucking space has started to draw investment, and those organizations have begun to grow. For instance, Truck It In and Bridgelinks, which have just raised investment. There are rumors of several other deals which are about to be announced. I had a visit from a couple of young people yesterday and some the day before who say that they can't reveal it, but we should be hearing in the next 4 weeks about more investments happening in the startup space. So it's indeed hot, as is the investment space in Pakistan. And for those of us who've been part of it for much longer than we would like to think, this is just what we've been waiting for. So thank you for the opportunity, and I look forward to answering any questions that people have.
Thank you so much, Jahan, for that really whirlwind of developments that's happening in the startup space in Pakistan. Finally, I want to welcome and introduce Mr. Asif Salim, Senior Director, Oracle, who is based in Singapore, to provide his remarks and talk also about why and how Southeast Asian countries and firms should be aware of Pakistan's digital trajectory and how they can hope to advance it in the future. Asif, floor is yours.
Thank you, Karthik, and thank you, Rukhsana, for giving this opportunity. As an overseas Pakistani, I've had the opportunity to be associated with digital programs in Pakistan, Indonesia, and the larger Southeast Asia region. And, my session would be focused on how Southeast Asia can, or how Pakistan can collaborate with the larger Southeast Asia region on the people front, e-commerce front, fintech front, payments front, data regulation front, and basically how can there be a larger collaboration from a tech talent perspective as well. So going back on me a little bit, I was associated with Standard Chartered Bank in Pakistan, where I launched the first internet and mobile banking app, working for them. That was my initial first 5 years of my career. And then I had the opportunity to move to Singapore. This is my second stint in Singapore. In between basically took a break and actually moved to Indonesia, where I was based in Jakarta, working for one of the world's biggest tech company as the chief digital officer for IBM Indonesia. So when it comes to Asia, I think Asia is on a roller coaster ride, and especially around digital transformation, we are seeing so much that has happened in the last 10 years. The change is massive, and the economies are really adopting to it. Temasek recently published a very important paper on the Southeast Asia economy, and especially around how this would be a $240 billion economy in 2025, out of which close to about 100 billion would be mainly in Indonesia. I heard one of my co-panelists actually talk about that, Pakistan is actually following the same ride where Indonesia was close to about 7 years ago. I completely agree to that. And as somebody who basically was based in Jakarta, I've had the opportunity to firsthand witness on how online startups like Gojek, which is Indonesia's fastest growing decacorn with an estimated valuation of $10 billion, basically scale up. And recently we are hearing Gojek and Tokopedia actually further merge together to strengthen the race on how they can make an impact in Indonesia. Also, continuing on the Southeast Asia story, there's a fairy tale story of Bukalapak. It's an e-commerce giant in Indonesia. The company serves over 14 million micro and small medium enterprises in the country, boosting a staggering 100 million customer count. And their collaboration with Grab Payments, which is one of the aspiring digital banks in the region, further points towards mega platforms. And not only that, I think when it comes to Pakistan, I see a lot of this being replicated in Pakistan in the next 6 to 7 years. Not only that, Pakistan is a very strong internet economy, and my co-panelist over here, Jahara, rightly tabled on how there's significant investment happening in almost all sectors. I think it is also connected to South Asia in a lot of ways. There's increasing level of local capital, young population, almost 70% of the Pakistanis are less than 30. And if you kind of connect this to the larger Southeast Asia region, there's a lot of connecting dots that you will see when it comes to people and population. I also see there's a lot of investment happening on enriching the 3G and 4G technology infrastructure. You know, how the internet landscape kind of helps drive not only digital economy, but also financial inclusion. When it comes to the financial services ecosystem, which are a backbone of any economy, I think right steps have been taken. And, there's a lot of activity that has started to pick up. The central bank is coming up with some very progressive policies, such as digital onboarding, so that you can open a bank account quite easily. Encouragement of digital sales and service transactions, right? So that, you could very quickly be able to kind of carry out those important transactions through your mobile app. The announcements of overseas Pakistani accounts and kind of making them connect to the larger ecosystem to drive inward remittance are all the steps in the right direction. It's great to see that the financial inclusion numbers have gone up. I was very happy to hear how HBL has gone up from 8 to 9 million bank to a 31 million customer bank. But I still see, if I look at the larger Southeast Asia region, close to about 1.5 billion people are still financially excluded. And as per the World Bank's latest report, a significant percentage of that comes from Pakistan. You know what, my co-panelist, Jahara talked about TAG, which is one of the digital banks, aspiring digital banks in Pakistan, raise a significant round. I think all of these steps will basically eventually kind of go to drive financial inclusion. In addition, what we are seeing over here in Southeast Asia is emergence of a lot of new digital platforms that are very services-led. That work that is happening in this region, especially around modern digital banks, modern connected platforms, is very, very inspiring. I do see in the next 3 to 4 years, when this digital foundation is laid, a lot of that will be replicated. In addition, I see strong opportunity for regional collaboration, say it be central banks, say it be fintech, say it be health startups, say it be tech fins. There's a lot of opportunity to learn and experience from economies that have been there and done that. I think Pakistan is catching up well. Having been based in Singapore, which has now become one of the world's best fintech hubs globally, I've seen this happen right in front of me. For the region, this represents an ideal opportunity where Pakistan tech companies can actually start develop cross linkages with companies in Southeast Asia and vice versa. This will not only involve the sharing of technology, but also some progressive ideas that can help build tech and policy linkages. For me, it's a no-brainer that this has to be a multi-stakeholder regional coalition among the countries in Southeast Asia. In 2018, a delegation of Pakistani startups actually attended Singapore FinTech Festival for the very first time. And since then, they've continued to participate in this forum regionally. And I see that a lot of those actually startups were the early startups that got funded and basically registered themselves on the investor radar and ending up started this wave in Pakistan. Regionally, we are also moving ahead from Web 2.0 to Web 3.0, and there's so much of opportunity to learn and collaborate in emerging tech space. There's a lot of opportunity to learn on the Smart Nation initiatives and the tech zones that have been developed regionally. All booming Asian digital economies right now, such as Indonesia, have actually created a demand on the legislative frameworks to regulate data, on how data is collected, processed, stored, and shared. I think these versions were initially inspired by GDPR and the open banking rules that were basically pioneered in UK. I feel that these rules that are governing how data would be basically significantly used from development perspective and growth of digital economy will be a very important area. As I see hundreds of millions of citizens in Pakistan connect online, there's an opportunity for how the data is managed, the mode through which the data is managed and operated. I guess as the country goes ahead, I'll see, digital identity as the pivot around how, validation is done, whether it's basically opening of a bank account, driving financial inclusion, or making important, purchase decisions, doing instant KYC then and there, which can really benefit the livelihood of around 220 million people. Lastly, to kind of conclude my remarks, I completely echo what my co-panelists talked about. I think during the last 3 quarters this year, Pakistan has seen a lot of fintech investment, close to about $300 million made, which collectively, is more than what was basically invested in Pakistan in the last, 4 years. So to say that the digital disruption has arrived in Pakistan, I think that assessment is extremely real. So back to you, Karthik.
Great, thank you so much, Asif. So we have a lot that's been covered here, the gamut from the public sector to the private sector to different kinds of innovations in various segments of the internet economy, e-commerce, fintech, mobile payments. We've covered quite a bit. So we're looking forward to the Q&A and with the audience now, which we're going to go into. So as the participants, the audience are collecting their thoughts and are ready for their questions, maybe I can just start off with one question for each panelist. And I'm hoping that you will be brief here so we can actually get to the audience and have them ask questions. My question for each one of you is, can you identify one, say, unexpected development, whether that's political, economic, legal, or an unexpected event or an innovation in the last few years that has really accelerated digital developments in Pakistan, whether that's in your specific sector or more broadly in the digital economy? So maybe we can go backward this time. Asif, I'll start with you.
See, I think, this whole decision of basically kind of involving the overseas Pakistani diaspora, which is close to about 10 million. I think it is one decision which has really helped the country in a lot of ways. Because if you analyze overseas Pakistanis, they're close to about 10 million out there, right? Out of which close to about 3 billion are people who are working with big technology companies, big banks out there doing really, high profile jobs. On the other hand, there are close to about 7 million out there that are basically in Middle East and in other sectors. So I think to basically involve them as part of this whole program and kind of create an opportunity for them to invest back into the country. That was one step in the right direction. And then to continue to give more opportunities on that front will be really game changing. I see there's a lot of opportunity. I think the work that has been done is primarily limited to bank account. There's a little bit of work that has started to happen around, kind of how to support them with home financing, how to support them with basically auto loans, etc. But if you look at the vision, and what I see that is happening in the Southeast Asia region, a lot of this is very services led, right? And if you could kind of map it out, what happens to an overseas Pakistani till the time he wakes up in the morning in his, host country, that is the way and the model to go. So I strongly believe, I think Government has definitely opened up, it's listening, and it's trying to take on these ideas to encourage change.
Jahan? Oh, you're muted.
Do you mean one action that the government has taken or anything that has happened?
It could be anything that you feel has propelled developments forward.
Okay. So I think Corona has more than anything else, because a lot of people that we spoke to initially about digital transformation, large organizations, government, they were not really in the mood to go digital. They thought it couldn't be done. Work from home could not be done, all sorts of things. So Corona pushed us all into trying it out, into trying out systems that allowed people to work from home. And so digital transformation started to happen. I mean, my own example, I would never buy groceries digitally online, right? I would buy from Amazon, but from any local online store, I had never tried it because I would prefer to walk into a store and then purchase something. So this forced me, I even bought air conditioners online. I bought, groceries online. I bought a computer table online. So this is just me, but it also allowed a lot of organizations to make sure that their online systems worked and provided services and products to customers that they were looking for because they could not leave their homes. And this empowered not only the employees in those organizations and brought many of the young people to the fore because they're the ones who understand technology. And there are people in those organizations who understood that. So I think that made a major difference. And the government, of course, the kind of services that they've started to provide, the entire ESAS program, everything, it just, made everything much better. And I think we're well on the way. Maybe we would have been slower to get there. And because of that, the number of customers that all these new online businesses have is because their customers are now online.
Right. Rehan?
Yeah, so, well, it's, other than what Asif and Jahan has said, and it's not unexpected, but it was a very welcome development. We've been working with government for about more than 5 years, from outside the government, trying to influence and facilitate. And what we saw was that there is lack of leadership when it comes to, having a will and seeing it through and then creating, whatever sort of initiatives that you take, seeing them through. So I think the country right now has right institutional leadership. The governor, I've seen him on roadshows himself.
I think we seem to have lost Rehan. I guess we can come back to Rehan. Mr. Mufti, would you like to go next?
Yeah, I would say Jahara. Let me explain my comment. Consumer, the customer. I think there is in the country greater comfort with the new technology. There has been acquisition of that technology, whether you talk about the number of people with internet connections, you talk the number of people with mobile phones, especially smartphones, and then awareness amongst them. Frankly, I think they're driving all of us, whether it's the government, whether it's companies like mine or other companies. I would like to go back to something Shabahat Saab said and congratulate him and support him. I think the movement started with Nadra was a key enabler. I think the ecosystem is getting built up over time. But at the end, it's the customer who started using it. And they're pushing all of us now. Things like COVID have helped expedite the movement, but there is a genuine homegrown desire by the customer to embrace the new world, the new way of doing things. And they're doing it. Jahara gave her own example of how she changed her behavior. So she pushed all of us. Because the customer demanded those things. That's my answer.
Great. Shabahat?
Yeah, thank you, Karthik. So just taking a leaf from Mufti Saab's book, what he just said about Nadra. Believe you me, Karthik, way back in 2001, 2002, so I was the chief architect and the design engineer of the Nadra's data warehouse in 2001.
Sorry, could I, before you start, could you maybe just, I think a lot of our audience maybe don't know what Nadra is. If you can just briefly explain it and then go from there.
Yeah, so Nadra, the National Database and Registration Authority, is chartered to do registration of citizens of Pakistan across multiple facets, like computerized national ID card, machine-readable passport, machine-readable visa, anything related to registration of citizens. Nadra is the custodian and has got the mandate to do it. So in 2001 and 2, I remember, I was the chief design architect for the data warehouse back then. And we had this vision that once we can create a CNIC-centric data warehouse or a CNIC-centric repository, we will have an opportunity to converge all the public and the private sector systems centric to CNIC, so that people will have the leverage on the private sector to build multiple applications across multiple verticals centric to CNIC, and the public sector to create all of these, to create a 360-degree view of a citizen based upon CNIC. So that part has not been done with the speed that I expected when we were designing in 2002. But I can tell you this one example. I mean, you would have talked about what significant piece that we have done at the government level. We have eventually developed, I think this is a revolution coming up in Pakistan, the e-services digital platform where citizens can actually bypass the long queues outside the government offices where there are middlemen. There are all kind of people who are trying to fleece money because they've been unaware of the processes and procedures of the government. This digital platform will enable them to interact with the government in real time and in a kind of a one-to-one manner. I can give you a very small example. Based upon this digital platform, in the last 14 months, for one use case that was collection of token tax for the registration of vehicles, yet let alone in Islamabad, we have collected over 1 billion rupees of tax revenue from the digital platform itself. I mean, the manual stuff is different, but just the digital stuff, the digital platform is being used to collect 1 billion plus rupees of tax revenue through the digital platform. I think this is one of the biggest achievements of this government at the federal level. And the secondary, briefly, government has shown intention to digitize itself at lightning speed. It's the first time again that the government has developed an e-office platform entirely for the federal government, where they have been started giving incentives to people who've been floating their files digitally rather than sending it manually. And there's a cutoff time that has also been given by the end of this year that all the ministries should be able to move files digitally to create transparency, to make sure that the citizens would know where the exact location and at what exact step on which their file is stuck at any given ministry. I think these two things are, I think, one of the biggest achievements of this government, and I think this is going to bring revolution onto the public sector digitization. Thank you.
Great. So we have a couple of questions now, and the first one is for you, Shabahat. Kim would like to ask whether the government of Pakistan is going to digitalize their cities along the lines of what other countries have done globally, like here in Singapore. And if yes, could you elaborate on what's happening and whether there are any PPP initiatives for smart cities in Pakistan?
Yeah. Thanks for that question. Yes, these are really exciting times at the moment. I know for sure there are 2 cities where a gigantic project has already been initiated. Lahore was first of them. Lahore Smart City project has been a massive success. There have been so many different equipments that have been deployed across the city in the context of intelligence, reconnaissance, metering, of different utility, equipment that has been placed across the city. Islamabad is coming up and, is coming pretty fast, the capital city, in terms of converting into a smart city. There, the convergence of different systems at the federal level, along with some data sources which are coming from the private sector, that is also on the cards. How we can merge the both systems together to give a single view to the government in the context of intelligence and reconnaissance. That is the first segment where they are trying to crack the code. And the funds are there. Projects have been launched. I think it's trickling down to the smaller cities also in the next 6 months to 1 year down the road.
Great. I think we have Rehan. Rehan has just joined us again. So I'd like to just return to him to finish what he was speaking earlier regarding his perspective of what developments have driven digitalization in Pakistan. Rehan, would you like to just complete what you were saying earlier?
Sorry, my computer is acting up, so I hope I'm fine. So I don't know where I got disconnected, but but very briefly to summarize, the point that I was making was that you asked, what is the key development, and I was talking about leadership being there in the country, and I'm talking about institutional leadership. And if you look at the governor of the central bank, I was referring to it that, you see him in the road shows. Usually central bank governors are not part of the road shows, trying to rally up people to, join the banking system, etc. And I think not only him, but there are other leaders as well, who have shown the will and a coordinated effort. So while there was private sector will always thrive on any opportunity that's thrown at them, I think what has been missing historically is, leadership from the public sector as well. And we have started to see. There's a long way. I would not conclude that, we are on the path and now, even if we don't have the leadership, we will keep going. We need, and this is something I wish for, we need stability in our policies, and we need continuance in our policies, so that with each change in government, regardless, we continue on this path, and each incoming government or change of hand of any political sort of system, etc., the development keeps going on. That's something I think that is going to take us around or across the finish line. That's something I think is unprecedented, I've seen.
So the next question is from Saklain, and this is for Jahan. And he wants to know, you spoke a lot about the kind of successes and the ongoing developments in the Pakistani startup sector. And he's asking what the biggest mistakes that are made by entrepreneurs in the startup phase, in the startup space in Pakistan, as they are trying to develop new projects, scale them, and what's your advice for them?
Yeah, so there are many mistakes that all of us make when we start something new. I think one of the biggest mistakes is that they spend a lot of money on the space that they are working in. So they want to look like a startup, so the glamour and all of that, they spend a lot of money on, and instead of focusing on the business. So the business is what they should be focusing on. My advice would be land your first few customers, make sure that the service you provide or the product that you create, you continue to get feedback so that you can improve on the product, focus on that. All the other things will follow. Don't focus on the money, don't focus on the space, focus on the value that you're creating for your customer. And there's no reason that you will not succeed.
Right. The next question is from Harish. And maybe I can direct this to Rehan. So Harish is asking whether the system created to make digital sharing in Pakistan is built on open source code and hence shared within any public repository.
So I think the question refers to the payments infrastructure. No, it is not built on open source code. Although globally there are developments in this area which are done on open source code. This is a proprietary software that has been procured. But in terms of the platform is going to be interoperable. The platform is going to offer connectivity by API in kind of an open API architecture. So the platform is definitely built on that. So if the expectation was, will this platform be very easy to connect with, just like any modern sort of infrastructure? So it is a modern infrastructure, and it will offer connectivity of different participants via APIs and the latest sort of standards as well. So that's where it's not clunky at all.
Mr. Mufti, can I maybe ask you to also jump in on this question, maybe talking about the bank's own software and different applications, and especially when you're talking about interoperability with other fintech startups, other financial institutions, if you can share anything there.
Yes, sir. So at HBL, we have been working with an open system. We introduced APIs last year, January, or before that, just before that. So today we have a lot of options where we can open ourselves up to intake of products and services from other companies. We are more and more working in that direction. Closed loop systems are there only where they're mandated by the marketplace or the regulator, for example, the clearing system, the linkage into the stock exchange. Those are closed loop systems, and those are not in our control. So those we follow their guidelines of the way they want us to interact with them. But for the bank itself, more and more going to the open space.
So the next question from Iti Abraham, and maybe I can direct this to both Jahan and Asif. Would a young Karachi techie work for Alibaba or Amazon today? And I think more broadly, the important question here is, has the proximity of China to Pakistan shaped its digital culture and aspirations in important ways?
I'm hoping he'll work for HBL or she will work for HBL.
Do you want to start, Asif, and then I'll come to John?
Sure. Okay, but I see, my understanding of the local ecosystem is that a lot of, in fact, I'll share my personal experience. One of my friend the other day, was given an opportunity to work for Amazon, and he said that I am not taking this opportunity and I'm going back. And I'm starting a startup in Pakistan. So that's my personal experience of how things are. Now, having said that, I see, kind of the ideas that are coming out of Pakistan right now are kind of, what the international world has done that in the last 5 years, right? So for example, if I look at basically ride-hailing platforms, if I look at Hill Tech, if I look at, a lot of these have been mega success stories in Southeast Asia. I think some of the originality of the ideas have now started to come in, which is very exciting, right? So Jahan talked about trucking. Now that's very, Pakistan specific, right? Because, this whole China economic corridor is basically ripe with basically how it's going to connect from a road connectivity perspective. And I think that is really taking and opening new dimensions, so much so that basically a unicorn has been shaped out of Pakistan, not only focused on Pakistan, but the global landscape. So I see there's a lot of opportunity on that. And on the question on the young techie, I think definitely, I'm sure that these guys would be interested in working with modern payment companies, modern banks, modern digital ecosystem. So that's how I see it.
So Karthik, I would add, what I would like to see is for them to continue to work in Pakistan, because many of these newly funded startups have huge vacancies. And if they are to grow, and if the tech sector in general is to grow at the scale that it can, we need a lot of trained and innovative talent. However, if they had a choice, I think there's some of them who would prefer to remain home simply because they can see the opportunities now of whether they start their own startups, as Asif said, or whether they join a startup, because now the salaries and benefits are much more competitive than they used to be. Some of them would prefer maybe to go and see what Amazon is up to if they're based, say, in the US or in Singapore or places like that. If they were to be asked to join Amazon locally, I think they would still look at many of the new startups that have been started by Pakistanis. As far as China is concerned, language is still a barrier. So I think joining Alibaba in China would be a very difficult proposition. However, Alibaba having invested here in Daraz, a lot of people have joined Daraz and are contributing to their growth. So that's what I see.
Shabahat, can I ask you to jump in on this as well? Particularly from, if you can maybe share some thoughts on the digital parts of CPEC. I know that China has been trying to figure out how to work with Pakistan in terms of fiber optic cables. Is that something that's still ongoing, and what's the kind of update there?
Yeah, I can throw some light on how our underserved and unserved areas are being lit up with connectivity, with fiberization. I can give you a few numbers there. USF, Universal Service Fund, which is an organization under Ministry of IT and Telecom, they launched about six projects last year, in the last fiscal year, 6 projects to light up the underserved and unserved areas across Pakistan. Last year, or the forthcoming year, starting July, they are launching 18 projects, right? It's almost, 4 times more projects in terms of geographies, in terms of spending also. 4 times more spending they're doing to connect, all those geographies which traditionally have never been connected and the people have never got access to internet or the smartphones. In that way, the penetration is going to be increased, definitely, more than what we expected at the beginning of the year. CPAC route is more or less in that region where, where there have been geographies, underserved and unserved geographies. They will definitely be affected also. And I think the business is going to get sure reflection of that for connectivity.
The next question is from Nishant, and this is for Rehan and Jahan. What are the biggest challenges to raising capital for startups in Pakistan? And maybe I'll start with Rehan first and then go to Jahan.
Well, I'm not the right person. I think Jahan is, but I'll definitely add that, the number of startups and the number of investors who are looking at Pakistan, I think this is one indicator that if there are any structural issues, they have been taken care of. And I think whoever is not looking in Pakistan is missing out on the opportunity. Jahan, over to you.
So I think one of the biggest challenges is to show the investor sustainability and growth. So a lot of the youngsters who start companies, so I'm not talking about the big ones who've back from Stanford, back from MIT, back from Harvard, who worked for Goldman Sachs. Those are the kind of people who find it easier to attract investment. They have the connections, they have the, the high profile. It's the youngsters who are from here, who've decided not to get a job, although they need it, they're middle class, but they have this innovative idea that they need to raise capital for. So the challenge then becomes, who's going to have faith in investing in them. So they need to prove that the idea that they're working on is actually they've got the know-how, the domain expertise, and the technical capability. And then, now there are enough investors locally to be able to look at them. So whether it's any of the investors that I mentioned in my talk, whether it's HBL, then, other angel investors have been investing over a period of time, but very small amounts of capital. So the biggest challenge really is to be able to show that they understand the business fundamentals, that they know that the idea will work, that they've done their research. And then I think investors are ready to invest now. The challenging part of the investment days are over, but still everybody's not going to get investment. So you need to be strong fundamentally before anybody will put in the money.
Right. The next question is from Mr. Klein, is for Shabahat. How will you ensure that digital platforms and conversions would replicate and trickle down effectively and efficiently in those government departments where I assume a lot of reforms have been undertaken?
Yeah. So great question, Mr. Klein. Thank you for that question, first of all. It's very important to understand, if you look around the world where e-governance and digital transformation has happened in the last 10 years, or let's say 20 years, taking a leaf from Estonia's book all the way to Brazil and Argentina, you would find out starkly that the initiative has always been sponsored and patronized by the head of the state, right? If you do not have the patronage from the head of the state, digital transformation in the government sector alone is going to be next to impossible, because the red tapeism, bureaucracy, they are going to put all kind of barriers and hurdles to stop the change that ought to happen. So we have got great initiative and patronage from the Prime Minister of Pakistan himself. Our president of the country is also very tech savvy, by the way. He takes keen interest in these digital technologies and keeps on visiting and showing up on the seminars. So since the patronage comes from the premier of the country, the cabinet ministers and there are 44 ministries and about 750 departments across these ministries, they have been told to adopt training sessions for their government servants so that they become comfortable with the newer and newer technologies and platforms which are coming up. So there are massive amount of trainings also go on, which MOIT conducts. And there are other private sector organizations which also come in and conduct those trainings so that the adoption could be accelerated. And I have seen massive change in the last 2 years.
Okay. The next question is from Zainul. Zainul's question has to do with, and I'm paraphrasing her, on whether Pakistan can serve as a bridge in terms of technology and digital issues within South Asia, and in particularly between India and Pakistan. Maybe I can go to Jehan first on this, and then Asif, because Jehan, you have some understanding and experience in India as well, and what's been happening there on the digital side.
For many years, we traveled back and forth from India I remember taking the first Pakistan IT delegation to NASSCOM's conference in Mumbai. And, the understanding, the kind of things that we can do together, all that exists. There was even, the Tata Consulting had come to some arrangement with a company in TechLogics in Lahore to set up a training facility, because the problems that TCS and other companies in India had faced in training people at the scale that was needed, they had that experience, they had the courses, they wanted to share that and work with TechLogics on that. But eventually it was transfer of money between India and Pakistan that became a problem, and nothing ever happened. So I think until there is some agreement between India and Pakistan in terms of at government level, collaboration will only take place through Dubai or through Singapore or through a third destination, because people are willing to work together. They know that India knows that expertise exists in Pakistan, especially in the areas of product development, now e-commerce, and in healthcare. There are a lot of areas where the two could collaborate. But yeah, the logistics, the sort of smoothing of the actual problems that exist in terms of working together, that becomes a little difficult.
Asif, do you want to jump in on that as well?
See, Karthik, I've never worked at a government level, right? But, everybody knows basically that at a government level, Pakistan and India, are not seeing eye to eye. But, when it comes to my personal experiences, being outside Pakistan for over 15 years, excellent relationships with people to people out there, excellent. A lot of my bosses came from, India. They've actually personally invested in me, kind of helped me develop as an individual, helped me grow as a professional, and vice versa, right? Even right now, there are so many, people who would be from India working with us in the company that I work for right now, or even larger Southeast Asia region. So I don't see, I think collaboration is the way to go. There's so much of opportunity. If you look at from a larger perspective, the world out there is moving really, really fast. I was just very excited to see basically, four, people venturing into space recently. It was such an amazing program, right? So my point over here is there's so much to do out there. And hopefully, things will be settled and there'll be a lot of opportunity for people to kind of watch cricket matches and do a lot of other things together.
So the next question is from Harish. And I'm going to direct this to Shabahat. Is there a Pakistani government policy on the adoption of open source technologies as the default option within government?
No, there is no such policy, as so to speak. There is a mixed bag at the moment. There have been a lot of discussions that we need to have some kind of a policy based upon a few use cases, right, which should be put on open source or should be put on a proprietary technology. But there has not been a crystallized document that would define that policy. I think probably in another year down the road, Ministry of IT may come up with some kind of a strategy. National IT Board would definitely be leading that. But so far, there is not that kind of a visibility at the moment on this one.
Great. So Shoaib has the next question, and I think I'm going to direct this to Jahan. Which are the successful startups in Pakistan that appear to be going for an IPO? And I guess a related question is, how can you convince youth in Pakistan? My guess is to enter the tech sector and to become entrepreneurs and operate in the startup space when the university curriculum is not necessarily geared to train folks to do that. So
there is two distinct questions. As far as startups are concerned, I don't know if many of them want to do an IPO. Many of them resist that. They'd rather have an exit than go on to the stock exchange. The Pakistan Stock Exchange is working hard to convince them that, this is a route that they can take. But there are good startups. There's the Raz.pk, which Alibaba has invested in. There's 10 Pearls, which has got offices now, not only in Pakistan, but in the US, and has been acquiring a couple of companies outside as well. There is, all these new startups, Airlift, which has raised so much investment. They're already successful as an entity. There's Food Panda, as I said, which was started by two young men whose startup was called eToy, was then acquired by an organization, and now he's leading Food Panda, a very young man. But none of them actually want to do an IPO. The only ones who've been doing an IPO are established IT companies like Systems Limited, like the Resource Group, people like that. So I don't know if that's going to change anytime soon. Maybe when startups see some value to doing it and raising money from the stock exchange, then perhaps. As far as convincing youth, See, I was in a talk last week at our Institute of Business Administration on exactly this subject, university academia linkages and how can we actually attract more kids to go into not only startups, but try new things. And the thing is, universities are no longer the place where the curriculum that they have is the main thing. The main thing that universities can provide is an avenue for networking, creating connections, teaching kids how to learn. The learning now takes place online. So with Stanford, MIT, everybody making their courses freely available online, universities cannot keep up with the curriculum. So the basic foundations they can set, but the curriculum needs to evolve, and universities are far too bureaucratic to have an evolving curriculum or to have the kind of faculty, unless they are from industry, who are experts in those areas. So in my opinion, kids are going into tech, they are going into entrepreneurship, and not because of universities, but despite them.
Do you want to jump in there, Rehan? Maybe add a few thoughts from Karanda's perspective?
Yeah, so we have active programs going on with universities to help them invest or create, research centers focused on current problems. And I think some of the universities are academia, they're quite keen. What I find sort of the gap is that while there are some research centers focused on problems of the past, but futuristic wise, I think we don't have that. And I think the public-private partnership in terms of bringing in the universities into solving problems, I think that's very, very important. There is appetite. Somebody just needs to sort of make an effort to do that. We have demonstrated one, which was housed in a university in Lahore. And there are a lot of prestigious universities who would be willing to do that. I think there was a think tank in Islamabad University as well on tech, but on fintech and solving some of these issues, I think there has to be an initiative.
Karthik, Karthik, this is Shabahat.
Yes.
I just want to add something here. Since this has been, defining times on the entrepreneurship side of the house in Pakistan. So I want to say something here for the audience, which we've been talking about quite some time. The traditional job-seeking efforts from the young generation of Pakistan, perhaps India also, and within this region, has been, hey, let's graduate from the college and try to figure out if we can get a job in the government sector, to begin with, right? Or they have had this sentiment that government should employ us in the very first place. I think the myth that needs to be broken, and which we have tried to break in the last 2-3 years, is that government cannot employ the young generation, right? Or to all that extent, in all that volume. The young generation should have, and they do have ideas, and they should go towards building their own companies. There is massive opportunity for funding at the moment from outside Pakistan as well as in Pakistan. The entrepreneurship club and the entrepreneurship landscape is booming, but it's still not there at the moment. I feel we need to create these awareness workshops. I mean, for Jahan as well, we need to create more and more awareness workshops across the educational institutions of Pakistan so that the kids who are graduating from the colleges, they should understand that their best bet is on the private sector to create new companies, because that's where the opportunity is, rather than focusing and putting all their efforts on the government side. That's my 2 cents here.
In fact, I think
thank you.
Yeah, please. Sagir, go ahead.
The profile we have, it's going to be very important, because job creation by government alone will not solve our problem of the youth coming out. I think it's creating the entrepreneurship opportunities which will help the youth. And youth are a very big part of our population.
Karthik, I'll just like to add one thing over here. Basically, if you look at the freelancing culture within Pakistan, it's one of the biggest. If you look at the top 10 freelancing countries in the world, Pakistan is easily among the top 5, right? And this is where I see there's a lot. See, I think, the Pakistani youth is very empowered, right? They know what to do, right? They're finding their way out themselves and they're creating these opportunities, right? Or, whether it's basically kind of developing modern web ecosystems, coming up with graphic designing skills, AI based, if you see right now, one of the best kind of digital hackers, or, I was reading the other day, actually are basically from Pakistan, right? So I think, and these are all young people who basically now working with modern tech companies, trying to help them create, ecosystems that are really safe and secure. So, I feel that the youth have found out the way. They're working on freelancing sites, they're working on Fiverr, they're working on other plays. They're very entrepreneurial in their approach. And some of them basically then go ahead and launch their own companies as well. I think Jahan will probably be able to add a little bit more, but that's what I've seen talking to a few people back in.
So you're right, Asif. I think they start off as freelancers, and then when they get more and more business online, they actually come together and form small companies, which then grow. We are looking at the possibility of more mergers and acquisitions happening so that the companies can be of a sizable size and can provide more employment and more scope. But I think more and more young people no longer want to join the government. There may be a certain segment who do, but more and more they want to work for themselves, or they want to work large organizations or startups that are now paying well, that are providing the training, that are creating opportunities for them to travel, for them to learn. I think it's amazing what's happening right now.
Great, thank you so much, John. So we are out of time, and we've had so much to talk about and so much covered here, but I want to just end with one question, and one question for each of the panelists, and I'm hoping you can be very brief. What does Pakistan's internet or digital economy look like in 10 years? Maybe I'll start from Shabahat first and then go down.
So within 10 years, so the way that I see it, I mean, it would be absolutely, a flying number that I can throw in terms of dollar value, or what could be the potential in terms of billion-dollar economy that we can build based upon tech economy. But what I can actually tell you, the way that I see all of these different industries started getting digitally transformed. It is an unparalleled event that is happening. I mean, industries like textile, right? Industries like manufacturing, never thought about industry, even like cement industry, never thought about these industries will ever digitize, themselves. So I think you may, throw a number. I mean, I think probably Asif can answer this better because he saw Indonesia 10 years ago, where in Indonesia was 10 years ago and where it is now. I probably see Pakistan much faster growing there because we have less language barriers, by the way, than Indonesia. We have got better skill set. We have got better dispersed diaspora across the world. I think we've got much better opportunity to grow faster than what the growth Indonesia has seen.
Mr. Mufti?
I think we will see a country where in the public sector, in the private sector, in the academia, and the entrepreneurial sector, you will see far greater leveraging of digital to complete their mission. So for the government to deliver e-government services. I think, as pointed out, sectors which are traditionally not thought about, we use data analytics. I was talking to a company which is in packaging, huge company in Pakistan. They are starting to hire a data manager to start harnessing data across their manufacturing business across multiple verticals. To entrepreneurs, and we just spent a lot of time talking about how there is a youth population in Pakistan, a young population, and the demographics lend themselves to creating job opportunities for them. And I think we'll see a lot more people going into these activities which is more entrepreneurial, supporting a much broader ecosystem. So I would say as a percentage of GDP, we would see far greater contribution in all businesses becoming more productive because of digital. Digital by itself is not an industry. Digital is an enabler. So I see contribution to the GDP growing. And there are a couple of World Bank studies which show it can positively contribute between 1% to 2% if done right. Now, I'm not here to tell you whether Pakistan will be 2% or 1%, but it will definitely more than today.
Rehan?
Impact on the overall country's economic boom.
Thank you.
Yeah, so to answer the question a little bit differently, I think and I hope that we are going to end up building a stack which will have its own power and, which will create its own way. And it will create a platform of multiple services, stacked into each other. I hope we don't sort of verticalize the digitization too much. We have multiple starting points, and that's the risk that we carry. So if you're able to build a stack and share each other's infrastructures between different entities and government entities, and also data, I think the opportunity is unlimited. That to me is one tipping point that we have to still cross. We're still sort of a bit verticalized in our digitization effort.
Jahan?
Yeah, well, I wouldn't like to look into the crystal ball 10 years from now, because things that many of us imagined could not happen at such speed have. I think given our demographics, we will see young people grab hold of many more opportunities to make not only business efficient, but also the way that citizens deal with any kind of service. So I see that happening more and more, but to look into the crystal ball right now, I wouldn't. But I think one of the things that we did miss out on is policies, the policies that are required. So far, we still don't have a data protection and privacy policy. The government has been working on it, but so far we don't have that. There are, security, cybersecurity, that's another thing that we need to be looking at. So if we can solve those things, then there are a lot of youngsters working now on AI. I met somebody the other day who's sort of talking to businesses about data labeling and gathering that data and making organizations, enabling organizations to do all this, automate the process, train bots, all sorts of things. So there is no stopping the young people from doing a lot of things that is happening all around the world. But I think the policies also need to be in place.
And finally, Asif.
Thank you. So I'll take three, KPIs, which I think can help us understand that, right? So on the e-commerce front, if you look at Pakistan, it's basically a $4 billion economy, right? And look at where Indonesia is by 2025, they're talking about $100 billion economy. So I feel, with similar kind of population size, I feel the next 10 years or even earlier than that, Pakistan will be touching at least $70 to $80 billion economy when it comes to e-commerce. On the GDP side, currently, it's close to about $350 billion. But then we also know that the undocumented economies are almost equilateral to that. So I do see, if you look at the larger Southeast Asian region, Indonesia became one of the biggest first country to basically cross $1 trillion economy, right? And I think Pakistan has the potential to kind of touch that, landscape as well. Tech sports, I think, as you continue to see growing focus of young Pakistanis getting into tech, currently we kind of export only close to about $2.5 billion. I think that number from a services mindset perspective is going to go up in the next 10 years, easily, around $15 to $20 billion. So again, we don't know. Nobody has the crystal ball, but I'm taking the liberty to throw out some stats out there.
Great. Thank you so much, Asif. I've definitely learned a lot, and I'm sure that the audience here have definitely learned a lot from all our distinguished guests and experts. And on behalf of the Institute of South Asian Studies at NUS and the Pakistan High Commission, I'd just like to thank all our guests again for joining us and sharing their thoughts and views on Pakistan's digital transformation. And thank you to the audience for joining us this afternoon.
Thank you, Karthik.
Thank you so much.
Karthik, thank you for hosting us.
Thank you, Karthik.
Thank you.
Karthik, and
thank you so much.
To the High Commissioner as well.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Karthik.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks again.
Thank you, Karthik. Thank you so much.
Thank you.